this is a time where I think we all need to be speaking out, and we all need to be sharing our thoughts, and when we're seeing things that just aren't right, and for me at least, downright un-American, we need to say it.
Yeah, amen. Do I have all the information right on how people can find your website and everything?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm not the foremost expert on how to find people on the internet.
I got it. So you wrote a piece the other day called "The Tower That Tells the Truth," and this article. This is what I reached out to Sean and asked her to book you based on this article. Because it was so profoundly shocking and also informative. You start out with the story of Belgrade. I've not been to Serbia, but I was in Croatia some years ago with Tom Hayden. In fact, we spent a week in Dubrovnik and with our families, and you can still see the bullet holes, right, in the old city, around the outside of the city, and people remember the war. I was doing my show from a local radio station. They let us borrow a studio, and I asked the guy who owned the station, what was the war like and what happened to him and his family, and he just broke down crying. His wife had been raped and his daughter had been murdered by the Serbs, and so anyhow, in Belgrade, there's this building that was bombed by NATO in 1999 that they've been preserving as kind of a memorial to the war. Tell us about that as a starting point for your article.
So when the United Nations began, when we go back to the early 90s, post the Cold War, when a lot of the dictatorships and the Iron Curtain fell down, the United States made it very clear that we were not going to allow genocide. We were not going to allow religious persecution. And of course, everybody knows the UN went in and bombings began by the UN, which at the time was a little critical under the Clinton administration, and under the Bush administration. But there were these buildings in Belgrade that were government buildings that were destroyed, that were bombed, and they became the symbol of what happens when dictators try to ethnically cleanse areas.
It's sort of like preserving Auschwitz, or Dachau.
In a way, yes. In a way, that's a perfect example. They became these symbols. You go back to Tiananmen Square, and obviously there were no symbols today about what happened in Tiananmen Square. But yes, it was this symbol of what happened. It was a symbol of this brutality that ruled what was the parts of the former Yugoslavia.
Right. So now
it stood for 30 years and was recently torn down.
Right, and it's being torn down because
our president's company will be building a tower where that building and that memorial, in a way, a memorial as we created here in the United States at Ground Zero, where that memorial stood, that reminder of history. The Trump organization will be building Trump Tower apartments where that one stood.
Jeez.
And I think the irony of that is unbelievable.
Yeah. Not to mention, Trump, basically profiting off his presidency in a way that George Washington has to be rolling over in his grave. Now, you, in your article, we're talking with Jason Egenberg. His Substack newsletter, the article that we're talking about is titled "The Tower That Tells the Truth." JasonEgenberg.substack.com is the website, I believe. You use that as the starting point in your article to step off into this larger discussion about how definitely since the end of World War II, but I would argue largely since the end of World War I, with Woodrow Wilson wanting the League of Nations and all that kind of stuff, that the United States has basically been in the democracy business. We've been in the business for a century anyway, more or less, of promoting the idea of power flowing from the people, that the politicians are servants of the people, that democracy is the best form of government out there. And suddenly now with the Trump administration, that has come to a screeching halt. In fact, it's being reversed. Tell us about that.
I used to say America, despite some of the things we've done during the Cold War, how we propped up certain types of governments to stop communism, we in a way were the world's moral compass. We didn't always act that way. But what we said was humanity and freedom always matter. And as we've ceded the world stage, as we've stepped away from that moral compass, the fear of American, I don't want to say retribution, but what America would do if certain lines were crossed is being erased. And the reason I chose Trump Tower being built was just because of the irony of it, but that symbol, that moment in time where we said no, where we said this is not okay. We will not allow ethnic cleansing. We will not allow people to be persecuted because of their religion. We will stand up and we will stand with them. Since 2017, that is eroded. That is gone. And we're seeing more and more brutality throughout the world, whether it's what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine, the Sudan, whether it's Israel and Gaza. We're just seeing the morality of the world erode. And it was America who took the lead in that. We believed in freedom and democracy and equality, and we sent that message through the world. And now there's a vacuum.
We literally sent that message to the world. We had, Radio Free Europe. We had Radio Liberty. We were broadcasting, in dozens of languages all over the world, messages of democracy. We had the U.S. Peace Agency. We had USAID. We had all these federal facilities, and now Carrie Lake is running our propaganda operation.
Which is horrifying.
Yeah,
which is one of the most horrifying. Which is one of the most horrifying things. I can't even. There are no words to describe the thought of Carrie Lake running our, running our message to the world.
She is, for people who don't know, she's the crackpot Republican out of Arizona, I believe it is, who ran for governor and lost, and then claimed that the election was rigged, and is full-on conspiracy nut, QAnon.
If you listen to Carrie Lake, there's no such thing as free elections in the United States. Everything is rigged by the Democrats. Exactly. Votes come in the middle of the night. And This is the woman sending our message of freedom out to the world. And it's not so much that she's changing the message. We're getting rid of that. We're getting rid of that. We're getting rid of that voice that was so important throughout the world. And it comes back to asking ourselves, who are we as a country? Who are we now? And I get into debates with a lot of people. Well, America did this, America did that, but we were its moral compass. When we were the voice of freedom. We were this, I don't want to use the word saviors because that's such a ridiculous word, but we were hope.
Yeah, no, we screwed up a lot of stuff, Pinochet and Mossadegh and blah, but you're absolutely right. We were the shining city on the hill, to quote Ronald Reagan.
Well, look, Saddam Hussein justified an ends to a mean in the Cold War. The Iraq-Iran war was a proxy war between us and Russia.
Yeah.
So, historically, Venezuela, a lot of the Central American countries, the things we did down there, the years we left Noriega in power in Panama, we allowed the drug cartels to take over in Colombia. So America's got a lot of faults. Let's not kid ourselves. The things that we've done, but there was this sense of this beacon of hope that we were able to portray to the world that is now gone.
Yeah.
You know,
so Jason, I only have a minute and 20 seconds before we hit a hard break that I can't control. This seems to me to be the Trump administration basically announcing, we don't care about democracy anymore because we intend to deconstruct democracy here in the United States. And it sure looks to me like that's what they're doing. What say you?
I also think we're going back to an isolationist point of view. I think a lot of MAGA's existence comes from this wrong notion that so much money is spent in foreign policy. I think the damage they did with USAID is extremely important. That was a vessel to funnel money into other governments. The CIA, actually, let's be honest, did use that to help funnel money to stop dictatorships, to stop the flow of communism, to run organizations. But it was a vital part of how we distributed money around the world, and that's gone. And yes, the message we are sending to the world today is that America, as it once was, the freedom of hope, the freedom of democracy, the American experiment, is withdrawing from the world, but we're also withdrawing from freedoms. Where the assault on freedom of speech, the assault on freedom, on all of our freedoms.
Yeah, on universities, on journalists, on judges. I mean, this is,
He's going after journalists now.
Yeah.
What's going on at CBS, what's going on at ABC.
Yep.
What he did yesterday to Caitlin Collins.
Yep.